You have a Gemara, Masechta Sanhedrin. The Gemara speaks about when Moshiach will come. So the Gemara says various different things over here. The Gemara brings a pasuk. The Gemara says, Tanya, we learned from the Beraisa, Rabbi Nosson says, Mikra zeh noike v'yored atohoim. This verse penetrates and goes all the way down until the abyss. What does it mean? It means that the same way the abyss, the Tahoim ein lo soif, there's no end, it's endless, so too, the meaning of this pasuk is endless. In other words, person can't say, okay, Mashiach will come at this point, and, that's the final time he'll come. But, in other words, there's no known end. As long as he tarries, we have to wait for him. Pasuk says, Ki oid chazay l'moed. There's still a vision for the set time. If he spoke about the end, and he will not lie, he will, in other words, eventually will become reality. If he tarries, you should wait for him. We all know that's the Ani Mamin. But it's based on this pasuk. In
the song,
yeah, because he'll definitely come and he will not delay. So he basically says that there were different chachamim that gave different various ends of days. They said Mashiach will come at this point, at that point. Rabbi Akiva, for example, felt that Bar Kochba was already the days of Mashiach. So he says, basically, don't give any set time. You have to be ready to wait. Don't. There's no set time for Mashiach. If you expect him to come, if he takes his time, don't give up. Still hope for him. Then the Gemara continues. What's the meaning of the pasuk? V'yafeach l'keitz v'lo yechazev. Yafeach literally comes from the word fiach or neficha, to breathe ear, which is another form of speaking. In the Nevi'im, they use this term for somebody speaking. So literally means the Eibusha spoke the end of days, and he will not make his word untrue. But the Gemara interprets the word yafeach like this: Amar Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rab Yonasan. Rab Shmuel bar Nachmani said in the name of Rab Yonasan, Tipach atzmon shel mechashvei kitzim. The soul of someone that calculates the end of days should burst, should go out. The word yafeach he interprets to mean, it's a tipach ruchi. The Gemara uses the term. Let his soul go out. Let his soul burst. It's a negative thing. In other words, he's chayav, the opposite of life. Why? Because they would say that once the end of they calculated the end of time, say, if he didn't come by now, he's not coming anymore. So through that they cool down the whole belief of Mashiach. Rather you should anticipate him. If you tarry, you should wait for him. Then he says, the rest of the pasuk maybe we'll speak about soon. Fine. So over here you have this is a known Maimer Chazal. Basically it says that you're not allowed to calculate the end times or the end for Mashiach to come. The Gemara itself gives a reason. It says that because through that it weakens the emunah b'yas Mashiach, it weakens the belief in Mashiach. The Rambam also paskins this, the halacha. The Rambam discusses in the end of Hilchos Malachim, he writes that we don't know the exact process how Mashiach will come. And the Rambam says that a person shouldn't really spend his time learning all the midrashim, speaking about exactly how he will come. This war will take place here, this thing will take place there, trying to figure out all the signs and the things, because the Rambam says there's nothing that,
doesn't bring any.
Nothing is clear. It doesn't bring you to fear Hashem, to love Hashem. The Rambam also writes you shouldn't try to calculate the kitzim, the end of days. Rather, the Rambam writes you should believe chakav yami. You should just believe in the general thing without trying to figure out exactly what, where, when, and how. And that's what you should anticipate. Now, this is a very famous subject. I just want to touch upon a few points, something that everyone probably heard about, spoken about. there were Gedolei Yisrael, there were great Jewish leaders who did calculate the end of times. The Rambam himself gave a calculation, not exactly for Mashiach's coming, but for the return of prophecy, which the Rambam says is a forerunner to the arrival of Moshiach.
Which is when?
The Rambam's thing was over about 1,000 years ago, a little place, roughly.
More.
More.
This is Baal Shem Tov.
Rabbi, you had the Gedolei Yisrael, that you had the Rekeach, and Rabbi Yehuda Achotzi, different Gedolei Yisrael. That time they were known to have Ruach HaKodesh. So this the Rebbeim were 300 years ago. We're talking about 1,000 years ago.
They can relate to it. They understood us. They know us.
So there's the simple answer that's given. There are those Bechlal that held that the only prohibition of calculating the end of times is people that will calculate the end of times based on astrological calculations, chveis. But other sources of Gedolei Yisrael went with this way of looking at it, that there's a certain prohibition involved in calculating the end of days. It doesn't mean that if you look in the Psukim or Mori Chazal, you try to figure it out, it's a problem. But Mamish, many others, mainstream understanding is that even that is prohibited. So over here, you have the basic explanation that's given. I believe the Rambam himself says that the reason that you had Rab Sadia, the truth is in the Gemara itself, you have throughout history, you had different Gedolei Yisrael giving times for the end of days. So one of the standard explanations is the reason why you're not allowed to calculate the end of days is because it could cause the Jewish people to go into despair. The time arrives and it doesn't come, it's not going to come anymore. However, those Gedolei Yisrael that did calculate the end of days is because they saw in their generation that the belief in Moshiach itself was already getting weaker, fading. So, in order to reawaken the belief in Moshiach, so they clearly said that not necessarily has to happen at this point. Don't think that this is it. Well, this is an opportune time for Mashiach to come. And through that, in their particular case, it didn't minimize, the effect that it had wasn't to weaken the faith of Mashiach. On the contrary, it brought back to the surface, or brought back in the front burner, the faith of Mashiach that had, that died out, that became diminished and dimmed because of the length of Galus. So this is the standard explanation that's given why the Gedolei Yisrael Mechasher the Kitzim. There's another famous mashal that I've probably everyone heard. I think the Malbim or someone, another Gedolei Yisrael lived a few hundred years ago, also I think calculated the Kate's end of days. I think he said the mashal. Other people said the mashal. It says a son and a father and a son set out on a journey, and they're very far away from their destination. So the son asks the father, "When we get there? We'll get there. Hey, let's look at the trees, look at the cows, look at the sheep, you travel on the highway. We'll get there, don't worry." When they're close up, and the son asks the father, "When we'll get there?" The father says, another 20 minutes, another half hour. Now he's already not afraid that the son is going to have ants in his pants and won't be able. So the same way, imagine if you would have been told in the beginning of Golos that the Gula Chais will come in Tav Shinayin test. You won't Kashal Koyach HaSeivel, won't be able to handle it. Huh? The other. Amen. Fine, we'll get to that. So Mamela, so he says, so then, when it comes already close to the time of Mashiach, so we already have the permissibility to try to figure out when Mashiach is coming, because we're close enough, we're already able to, try to figure out exactly when it will happen. Now, the Rebbe discussed a number of times the idea of the kitzim, the idea of the end of days. There's two questions really here that come up. One question is, how could these Gedolei Yisrael go against what the Gemara says? How could these, talking here not about Stam people, we're talking about leaders of the Jewish people in their time and age, the Rab Sadi Goyen, the Rambam, and others, Rashi, and how could they go against what the Gemara says, not to calculate the end of days? That's number one. Second of all, L'chayra, they Itaka made a mistake. What they said is untrue. Itaka have a pasuk at the end of the Nil. The Eibusher tells the Nil was the only one that the case was revealed to. That hidden, whatever it is. It says, so the Eibusher revealed to him at the end of days, and he says, go and hide everything, make it Ksumim v'chsumim hadavarim. The words are sealed and hidden away until the end of time. And it says, Yisbareru v'yislabnum. These words we've heard, that one of the meanings of the pasuk is that it says how a lot of people will try to figure out when the end of days will come, or some people will try to hasten the end of days and through using their own means. But he says, but no one is going to, a lot of people, they're all going to make mistakes, and they're not going to know, get to the bottom of it. There's actually, I didn't look inside the Zohar now, but the Zohar says that for something along the lines, the Gemara uses the term that this pasuk that says that, there's still a time and don't give up, if he tarries, you should wait. It says, it penetrates, it cuts down all the way until the abyss. So Pshat is that, in other words, there's no end, there's no way of figuring out anything. It's the same way the abyss has no end, it's Mayim Shein Lo himself, water that has no end, so too there's no way of figuring out the end of days. But I believe the Zohar says something in the lines that in order to figure out the end of days, you have to understand, you have to go all the way down to the bottom of the Imkei HaKlippus, the depth of Klippus, because the end of days is based in a time when all the Klippus will finally be, rectified or destroyed, whatever it is. So in order to do that, it says a person that will try to figure that out spiritually will have to really contemplate the levels of the Klippus, and it's a very big danger for him. Because he could fall. It says it's like an abyss. It's a big cliff. You understand? It says, I think it says that the Nil, by him, for some reason, I forget why, he was in a state that he was completely butter, was completely refined. So by him, he was able to understand the calculation of the end of days, because he knew all the depths of the clippus, and it wouldn't affect him, because he was completely refined. I forget exactly the point. But he uses a very interesting thing, that he uses Neikevered at HaTohim. Says whatever the Zohar has, the Tohim is a reference for the depth of Klippa. In order to understand the end of days, you have to understand the cheshboinus of how long the Klippas it takes for them to be rectified. But in order to do that, you have to contemplate and get in these Klippas, and that causes an association with them, and it's very, very dangerous. So it's something to stay away from. But getting back to the discussion, and the two questions are how did they do that? How are they allowed to do that? So that is like a number of answers that are given to strengthen the moon and the Jewish people and so on and so forth. And the second question is l'chayra, they lied. And you have Taka, certain places Taka says at these Gedolei Yisrael, there's Taka, they made a mistake. In other words, the Eibishter made it. The Eibishter himself prophesied through the Nil that there will be great men that will try to figure out the end of days, and they'll make a mistake. And they shouldn't have tried. Maybe, or at least they tried for whatever reason. They tried to be mechazek diniya, but it's taka nishta wasn't. They didn't get it. They weren't able to get it. Actually, so interesting word recently. I forget exactly where it says. Interesting sefer. It says when Moshiach will come, the Eibusha will show the Yidden how the end of days was clearly spelled out in the Torah. And then we'll chapsich parankop that how is it shaykh that we didn't see how it's clearly written in the Torah. But now at this point, even though it's clearly written, the Eibusha makes it in a way that we can't figure it out. Anyway, so the explanation based on the Rebbe Sichos, and there's a number of explanations that are given for this thing. One, there's a few points to this. First of all, the famous Sicha that the Rebbe said, the Rebbe mentioned many times, the story with the Rebbe Marash and the Tzemach Tzedek, that the Rebbe said in a Maimer, a case, Elef Shameis, whatever it was, the Rebbe said that Mashiach will come in the year Tafrei Ches, which is 1848 in the secular calendar. So the year Tafrei Ches passed, and the Rebbe Marash asked the Tzemach Tzedek what happened, with the Rebbe's prophecy, Mashiach will come at this time. So the Tzemach Tzedek said it's not enough that the Likutei Torah was printed, which means the Rebbe explains the Likutei Torah is a taste of Mashiach, and spiritually it is the coming of Mashiach. And if you're living at a level that's higher than time and space, in other words, it just has to materialize physically down here, but on a spiritual level, you already have it. So the Rebbe Marash says, well, we need to have Mashiach kipshuta, we need to have Mashiach down here physically. So the Rebbe basically explains that a lot of these kitzim end of days mean that there's different revelations. In other words, there's the ultimate end of days when Mashiach will come down, b'poel mamish, b'elam asiyah hagashmi, this physical world. But then there's many, the Zohar says that in each generation there's an end of days, and also in each world in other words, there's different levels that we reach a certain milestone of completion of avodah. In a certain level, in a certain way, the avodah is complete compared to the the expectations of the Jewish people at that time. So this already ushers in a certain revelation of the end of days. So Beruchnius in all of these things, there was whatever was the revelation of Pnimius HaTorah, whatever else that took place, that etaka be'emes, in other words, it's not pshat that it wasn't a real true thing. It was something that was true, but it took place Beruchnius. On another standard explanation, I mean, it's not the same lines that the Rebbe said, it was not necessarily a complete contradiction to it, is that all these kitzim are zman mesugel, are times that are opportune times for Mashiach to come. And if the time is used out properly, it could bring the gula, but if it's not used out properly, Rahman al-Islan could be in the reverse. We have, for example, the year Tach V'Tat, 1648, the great massacres of Chmielnitsky, Machshimoy, and so on. The Zohar said that was the year Mashiach was supposed to come. It's one of the kitzim. There's a few kitzim in the Zohar. One of them is Tach. So some of people explain that it had a very, very great potential that year. If the Yidden would have really worked up their avodah, they would have had the redemption. And because they didn't, in other words, dafka because there's like a certain kitrug, there's a certain in heaven, it becomes like a taina. How come the Yidden Taka didn't do their avodah in the way the Mashiach should come? So that Rahman al-Islan, brought whatever it brought. So one standard explanation is that these kitzim, either the opportune times or spiritually they're true. There's another interesting, there's a few other points here that's kedai to mention. One interesting point is that Bnei Yisachar says a word, it's hard to understand, he says when Mashiach will come, he says time, the Eibusher runs time. In other words, it's true on the calendar the date might have already passed, but I don't understand exactly what that means, but when Mashiach will come, the Eibusher will show us how that time of the cases, that whatever, the Eibusher will say, bring that time now. I don't know exactly how that works, but when Mashiach will come, we'll see that all these kitzim are 100% true, all these times are 100% true. The Eibusher, he's the balabas over his man, so...
I read once somewhere, I don't remember exactly, but some sefer said that if Chas Shalom comes...
It wasn't the Chassan, I think it was one of the Balei Amusa. Talking about that it comes the last second before Elef HaShvi, he'll still put on tefillin.
Next morning.
I think it was, I don't know if it was, I think they say whatever, Chalif. Huh? You heard of the Chasam Sefer? Yeah, that's the Chasam Sefer said. That's written in the Sfarim.
Yeah, but he said that it's going to come next morning and take his talis and fill and go and shul for davenants and the Hilton B'Shefer. That was his
Kind of.
I think it's a little blend.
It's what machs kids in the diskussion der Eibischte. Der Eibischte was schaffen, der Eibischte war was of the world.
Fine, that's true. That's bringing out a different point. It's bringing out that the Chasam Sofer writes in the Tshuva, he doesn't accept that Bias and Mashiach as Iker B'das. Because he writes, you have to serve the Eibusher regardless if Mashiach comes or not. Fine. Huh? That is true. That's true. But on the other hand, Mashiach is fundamental. Mashiach is not just an additive.
Mashiach's job is to get us closer to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Even Mashiach's never saw Hashem. So the whole idea is to...
True, but in other words, true. But the point is, the reason why Mashiach is a fundamental of Jewish faith, because you can't serve Hashem completely without Mashiach. Again, nothing is not...
The creation of the world was for Mashiach's time. The Tachas, the creation of the world, was for the time of Mashiach. It's not. No.
Okay, fine. You're not arguing. Fine, let's continue. Anyway, huh? You're not arguing. You have different ways of looking at the same thing. Huh?
If a son sees his father doing something not proper, he can't tell him directly. He has to say,
Tati, kosa potato kach lekach, and this is what certain tzaddikim see. The Eibishter is not letting us out of Golas, and it's it's not right. So they find something in the Torah, and so they say Tati, kosa potato kach lekach. You have to figure it out.
But I'm not trying to be controversial. What Chazam Sofer is saying is that the Mashiach himself, even if he's the potential Mashiach, doesn't know himself if he's sure Mashiach, if he's Mashiach Vadai until like 5 seconds before.
Don't say 5 seconds before. So what does that have to do with anything? Fine. Okay. Good. Let's not get into theological. That's true, but the tachlis hakavana is that it should be dira b'tachtoinim. Worshipping the Eibishter is part of making dira b'tachtoinim. Fine. Good. Let's go. Okay. Let's go. Let's go next. We'll continue this later. Let's go. Anyway, this has nothing to do with the shir now. This has. Fine. Good. We'll have notifications later. Let's continue. So, at any rate, getting back to the discussion at.
Okay.
Fine. I have to give a shir. Thank you. No, I'm not taking away your credentials. So, getting back to the discussion at hand. So, the Bnei Yisachar uses episode word that when Mashiach will come, the Eibush will, again, it's hard to, he'll show us how really it ended up being at that time. How, I don't know. But anyway, but there's another word here. The commander, he says a very interesting word. I mean, it's a word that another Gdeli said like that. Said, certain tzaddikim said Mashiach will come at a certain time. He says, the tzaddikim that said that, he says he gives a very interesting explanation. There's 2 types of tzaddikim. Certain tzaddikim, they see Mashiach's coming when, in other words, by a tzaddik, when he finishes his avodah, b'shleimus, so in his neshama, in his neshama, he completely fixes up his neshama and all the neshamas that are connected to it. So he feels the coming of Mashiach. That's to him, in his vision of the coming of Mashiach, is the completion, is the revelation of when he completes his avodah. So he feels that this so to say, the Zabias of Mashiach prati. He feels that this is. I have many tzaddikim. They say that they said Mashiach will come the year that they would pass away, because they felt a certain sense of shleimus, of completion, that the avodah was getting culminated. So to them, that was the coming of Mashiach, but it wasn't the coming of Mashiach for Klal Yisrael. It was their coming of Mashiach. Says then he goes through a whole thing. There's this different tzaddikim that they're mushrish in a certain level of elokus, that they're rooted in a certain level of spiritual worlds, and when those spiritual worlds are completely complete, when they say Mashiach will come, it could be referring to when their neshama and their world that they're from reaches this complete rectification. Mashiach, so to say, comes in that world, but it doesn't mean that it's coming for all Klal Yisrael at that time. The Rebbe discussed many times. There's a Mashiach prati. There's a personal revelation of a person of the Yechidah Sheb Nefesh, of a person's connection with the Eibishter, which in avoid is the coming of Mashiach, and then which that's a personal thing. It's for him. Doesn't necessarily have to do with the whole world at large. So he gives a thing up in Kabbalah. He said, Moshe, just that it says in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said in the Zohar, the Mashiach will come in the year 1648. It says for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, for his level, that was Taka with Mashiach, and spiritually via Mashiach. But for Klal Yisrael, I don't want to go through the whole period. Come on, he says that Rashbi was a Naim. Then there's a Leiv. Via Mashiach for Klal Yisrael is totally in Leiv. I don't want to go through the whole period. It's going to take up some time. But that's a word that he says. From getting back to the Rebbe Sichas, the Rebbe explains. The Rebbe is because the reason why I'm mentioning all this is coming in Parshas Vayechi. In Parshas Vayechi, you have that Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of days, and it was hidden away from him. Either the end of days was hidden, the Shechina was hidden from him, and he realized he shouldn't reveal the end of days. The Rebbe has many Sichas discussing this, and the Rebbe says there, the Rebbe explains that simply you understand that what's the disadvantage of the Yidden knowing when Mashiach will come, because then they would get into the spear, right? Like we're learning over here. The Gemara says, they say, well, if the Kates didn't come at this time, he's not coming anymore. But the Rebbe explains that Yaakov Avinu wasn't referring to the end of days, the final end of days. He was referring to, that the Yitzias Mitzrayim was trying to tell them that if they would do their Avodah properly, so the end of, when they go out of Mitzrayim, that would be the final Gula. So they should, make sure they do the job right. Why was the Kate hidden away from Yaakov? Because the Rebbe says, the union of Mashiach as revelation of godliness is higher than changes. The essence of godliness, in order for that to be revealed, it has to come from a Yid, serving the Eibusher from the essence of his neshama. If a person is just serving the Eibusher because he knows the Moshiach is coming at this date, and that's influencing and that's propelling him to do his avoid in a certain sense, it's not coming from him himself. It's not coming from that level in his neshama, which is, higher than changes. It's coming because of an outside influence. So it's not going to reach. It's not going to bring out the Gula. It's not going to. So why did Yaakov Avinu want to reveal the case? Because Yaakov Avinu wanted Mashiach should come what quicker. Listen, they gave if it's the Gula, let it happen already. But the Eibusher wanted the Gula should be the way it's supposed to be. But the Rebbe says interesting about the fact that Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of days gives a koyach. He said the same thing which other Gedolei Yisrael gave different kitzin, gave different end of days. It gave the koyach that a Yid, even in the time of Gola, should at least in a way of makif, maybe not in such an internal way, but in a higher way, in a transcending way, be able to serve the Eibishter, may aim somewhat of the type of freedom we'll experience in the times of Mashiach. Very interesting, powerful message. So even though he's still in Golos, but he still is able to some way the fielding of Mashiach. But I want to finish off with one powerful word that Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe says, Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of days, and the end of days was hidden from him. So it seems that what's happening, he wants to reveal. The Eibusher takes it away from him. The Rebbe says a very powerful word. No. The Rebbe says the fact that the end of days was hidden from him, this is how he's revealing the end of days. What does that mean? He says when a Yid feels that the end of days is hidden from him, he sees tzaddus, he sees things, he can't relate to Mashiach is coming right now. And nevertheless, he serves the Eibusher with the munah pshuta, achakale b'chol yom Mashiach, he trusts the Mashiach is coming today. That avoida brings out the etzem of his neshama, and that brings the revelation of the kates. So when you know when Mashiach is coming and you serve that, you do your avoida, it's not bringing out anything in you. You know you're doing. When you don't know when you're doing, that brings out your real etzem and nefesh. So when Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of days, the fact that the end of days was hidden wasn't contrary to what he wanted to do. Punkt vaket. How does he reveal the end of days? How does he bring about Mashiach? But Poil is dafka when the Yid in his way, in his, him it seems it's all closed up, and nevertheless he still serves the Eibusher, means that his connection to Eibusher goes beyond what his logic is telling him. It goes beyond the changes and the concealments of the world around him. That brings out the revelation of the case. Zayin, take it from Yad Mamish.